Hi, this is Clay Sterling, and this is MREA's Solar Electricity Primer. So there's a whole lot of things we need to know about solar electricity or any renewable energy system, but for the purpose of this primer, this is just something to whet your appetite and give you some place to start. We're going to just take a few topics and go into a little bit of detail on them. There's certainly way more to know. So anyway, we're going to be talking about photovoltaic or solar electric photovoltaic, and we're going to be talking about the production of electricity by a solar module, which we have on the left here. Solar water heating, which you see on the right, is a hollow metal box with a glass front that tubing runs through, and we heat a fluid and then transfer that fluid somewhere through pipes with the use of a pump to a water heater or space heating, something like that. But we don't heat water with electricity. That's expensive. What we do with electricity, we can put a number of modules up on a house and generate enough electricity to power that house on an annual basis. That's what we can do. That's what we're going to be talking about. We're talking about photovoltaics or solar electric, which is represented on the left-hand side here. So a few terms and definitions to get us on the same page. The utility grid is a network of wires that run up and down our streets that start at the generation plant, right here, and go through the transmission lines, through the power line on top of the power poles, and then end at the house at the outlet. You plug in a blender and you make a smoothie. So that's the grid. That's how we get our power from the power plant to our outlet. So what we're going to do is out here somewhere, we're going to perhaps put a solar electric system. We're going to wire that into our home electric system. And then we're going to power up our home, our electric needs for the home, for the coffee pot, the lights, the TV, all the electrical stuff. We're going to power up off of both the utility and the renewable energy system. If there's overproduction, we're going to backfeed the utility grid and store our power in the form of a credit on the utility side. And at nighttime, or when we're not producing as much electricity from the renewable energy system, we're going to buy electricity from the utility, and that may be buy back our credits or just maybe buying directly from the grid. So our home is going to be powered up by both renewables and the grid. There's a number of different goals we can choose. We can have a home that's totally independent of the utility grid, and we can generate all of our electricity on site for that home. That's possible. We'll talk about that more later. But in general, 98% of all renewable energy systems that go in for photovoltaics are an integration of the renewables, which are out in the backyard, and the utility. Watts is a measure of power. Volts times amps equals watts. It's like the amount of energy or amount of power that a PV module will produce in an instantaneous amount of time. So in full sunlight, a module will put out its rated output. In less than ideal conditions, when we have cloudy days or partly cloudy days or hazy days, that module is going to put out less power. So watts is volts times amps, so I'm going to refer to systems and modules in watts. Or I can say 1,000 watts is equal to a kilowatt. And I can refer to systems that are larger in size as, for an example, a 20 kilowatt system is the same thing as a 20,000 watt system. A 5,000 watt system is the same as a 5 kilowatt system, and so on and so forth. So we can use those interchangeably. A kilowatt hour is a measure of energy. So we have watts times time, and we get kilowatt hours or watt hours, depending on what units we're working in. So this is now power over time, power times time. This is something that's real. This is how we buy and sell electricity. And so our home is going to consume electricity, X amount of kilowatt hours per month, and our system is going to produce X amount of energy per month or a year or a day, and that's going to be in kilowatt hours per day or month or year, depending on what units we're in. Down at the bottom, we have a sample or an example here. We have 100 watts times 3 hours equals 300 watt hours, which is the same as saying if we divide 300 by 1,000, it would be 0.3 kilowatt hours. Same thing. different label. We can think about power as being like the speedometer in our car is just a number. We can be going down the road at 120 miles an hour, but that doesn't mean anything. That's instantaneous. It's when we put time to that, then we get a consumption or production number, which is like the odometer in your car. So here we have this car who's gone 73,294 miles in its lifetime. That car didn't drive 120 miles an hour all the time. It didn't go 124 miles an hour all the time. It didn't go 20 miles an hour all the time. Varying speeds, varying distances, different days, different situations that make up this 73,294 miles. So the energy is equal to consumption or production. This is the rate, power, times time, that gives us this consumption number. This is like the dials on your utility meter. You consume electricity, the meter just spins forward. At the end of the month, the meter reader comes to your house, reads the number, and subtracts that number from last month, and that's how much you consumed over that month in kilowatt hours for that month. Rated output, or nameplate rating, is how much power a module or a system will put out at its maximum instantaneous reading. So if we have a 250 watt Helios module in full sunlight, ideal conditions, that module will put out 250 watts instantaneously. And again, that means nothing unless we add time to that scenario. If we have an array of 10 250 watt modules, the rated output of that system would be 2,500 watts, or 2.5 kilowatts in full sunlight. Now again, we don't have time as a part of this equation yet, so it's just a number, it's a potential that the system can do in full sunlight. Again, think about the speedometer and the odometer. When we talk about nameplate rating or max output, we're talking about the speedometer. When we talk about production over an annual amount of time or a month, we're talking about the odometer, which is real information. If we add time to this, here we have 10 250 watt modules, or nameplate rating or rated output of 2,500 watts or 2.5 kilowatts in full sunlight. So if we put that system in full sunlight for 1 hour, 1,000 watts per meter squared, that system would produce 2,500 watt hours or 2.5 kilowatt hours. Here we have time added to the system output, and we get real energy. That's how it works. Here's a little nice illustration of the sun's energy. Ideally, at sea level, on a clear, crisp day, we're going to get 1,000 watts per meter squared at or around solar noon. That's when we're going to have our best production, when the sun's rays are perpendicular to the face of the modules. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum would be nighttime, and somewhere in between is our typical day. Cloudy skies would have less energy, less fuel for our solar energy system, so we have less production. Maybe it would be 200, 300, 400 watts per meter square at noontime or any time of the day. On partly cloudy days, maybe around 600. And then typically we see most days, summer days, spring days, fall days even, we're going to be hanging around 800, 900 watts per meter squared. Why is this? Well, because of the pollution, dust, pollen, water vapor, all this stuff that's in our atmosphere is filtering out the solar radiation, or reflecting or diffusing the solar radiation, and we're not really going to get 1,000 watts per meter square during those kinds of days, and we're actually going to be hanging around the 800 watts per meter squared. In the wintertime, when we have nice, clear, crisp days, not a lot of water vapor in the air because it's so dry out, we're going to be at 1,000 watts per meter squared. If we have snow on the ground, we may be above that. We may be at 12 or 1,300 watts per meter squared because of reflection up off the snow. So this is what we would typically see as the fuel for our solar electric system on any given day during the year, somewhere between 0 and 1,000 watts per meter squared. And our system, or our module, is always rated for full sunlight, right over here on the right-hand side, 1,000 watts per meter squared. Net metering. All investor-owned utilities are required by federal law to allow you to hook up to their system and backfeed the electrical grid. And you'll be compensated at retail rates for that excess electricity coming off your system. So we're going to buy at X amount. Around here, it would be 12.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And we're going to sell or store our electrons as a credit on the utility grid in the form of a credit at 12.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And that varies from utility to utility. So we can store electrons on the utility as a credit. And then we're going to use those credits up during other parts of the year. In the wintertime, when we don't have a lot of solar resource, we're going to use credits that we racked up in the summertime or in the springtime or whenever we have excess energy. But there are catches to this system. So here in the state of Wisconsin, we can have up to 20 kilowatts of rated output of solar, of wind, or a combination of solar and wind or microhydro. Long as we're at 20 kilowatts of rated output or less, we fall into this net metering category. If we go above that, if we have 21 kilowatts of rated output, then we fall into a different category. So we're going to buy electricity at retail rates, 12.5 cents, and then we're going to store our electricity at wholesale rates, which are, I think, around 3.2 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's to our advantage to stay at or below the cap. And other states have other criteria. Minnesota is 40 kilowatts, Michigan is 150 kilowatts, Indiana 10 kilowatts, Illinois 40 kilowatts, and Iowa 500 kilowatts. If you would like to know more about this, more about net metering law, or specifics on your state, go into www.desereusa.org. And then click on your state, and it'll pull up all the renewable energy information for your state. And that's updated on a regular basis, maintained by the University of North Carolina. So how does this all work? Well, here we have a PV module. Has a number of photovoltaic cells, which are here, 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 here. 9 PV cells in a row here, and 6 cells going across the bottom. So we have cells right here, which make up a module. Each cell, here, here, and here, these individual cells are made of silicon, and they have a positive side and a negative side. Each cell puts out DC electricity, and when we link one cell to the next, we can build up voltage within a module. So here we have an individual cell. If we look at it crosswise, we have 2 layers, a negative layer and a positive layer. Photons from the sun, energy packets from the sun, come down, penetrate the upper layer of the photovoltaic cell to the bottom layer. They knock an extra electron out of the outer shell of the atom, silicon boron, silicon phosphorus, bounce that electron up into the upper layer where we have an overabundance of free electrons. If we connect a conductor from the upper layer to an electrical device, and from the electrical device to the bottom layer, we have a circuit for the electrons to flow. So the free electrons in the upper layer are allowed to flow to the appliance, and then from the appliance to the bottom layer where they recombine with an atom and are knocked off again and sent through the circuit again. So this happens billions of times a second on the face of a photovoltaic cell. The photovoltaic cells are what make up the modules, right here. Each cell puts out about half a volt of electricity DC, and we link these cells together in series to build up voltage. This is a 36 volt module, or about 30 volts nominal voltage. We get that 30 some volts by linking cells together in series and then paralleling strings of series together in parallel to build up amperage. So that's how we get a higher voltage module from this tiny half volt cell. The rated output of the module is the combination of all these cells together. This could be, this is a 190 watt monocrystal module. Maximum output in full sunlight would be 190 watts. The makeup of a module, we have the cell, which is covered with glass hardened glass over the face of this. And that glass there's different standards, but in general, that glass can withstand an 1.25 inch hailstone moving at 90 miles an hour. And on the back side of that module, these white pieces that you see here, 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 that's the back sheet. So we have a protective layer on the back side, which is a Kevlar, a tough plastic, but it's vulnerable though on the back side. Plus there's a junction box with wire connections on the back as well. And then this whole thing is held together with a nice, rigid aluminum frame. And this is where we're going to do our mounting. We're going to mount or clamp the frame to rails, which is going to hold our modules together into an array, whether it be on a roof or on a pole. We'll see different incarnations of that. Here's a couple of examples of what modules can look like. This is a module here, and that has a clear back sheet instead of the white Kevlar. This has a clear back sheet. So we have a pergola here that has modules mounted on it. We have shading going on by the solar cells, which we see right here. And diffuse light is allowed to pass through the non-cell portions of the module to us down below when we're having our mint julep. Really nice. Here's a module that has a black back sheet and a black frame, aluminum frame. This would blend in well with a dark colored roof surface. So we're looking at aesthetics. This is a flexible PV module called amorphous, and it's formed into the shape of a roof tile. And then here we have conductors coming out the top right here. Each tile is a module, and each module is connected together with these connectors right here. So it's all about curb appeal and how it looks from the street. And I totally buy into that. I didn't earlier, but in the early days, but I certainly do now. That's really important. Here we have a crew putting on a field-applied amorphous material onto the pans of a standing seam metal roof. So this is the module right here. It's a flexible module, this amorphous material, which we're going to stick down to a metal roof. It'll stay there permanently, and then all the wires are junctioned together in the ridge cap right along here. Other mounting systems, 98% of all systems that go up in the United States on a home are going to be flush mounted or parallel to the roof deck. Here we have the roof deck. Here we have the modules. These modules are mounted in a configuration that they're parallel to the roof. There's a small air gap underneath, a couple inches underneath, to allow air to circulate underneath the modules, dry out the roof, add some passive cooling to the array. But this is pointed to the south all day, every day. We can't adjust the tilt angle, and we don't have to worry about wind loading or anything like that. Very simple design. 98% of all systems are like that. Here we have a top of pole mount. Perhaps we can't have a roof mounted system. There's too much shading. The roof is oriented the wrong way. The covenants won't allow us to do that on the city side of the street side of the home. So we can mount them on poles. Here we have 3 arrays mounted on poles up off the ground, so we can still do stuff underneath them. Depending on the type of system, we can change the tilt angle of this array for the summertime and wintertime because of the sun angle change during the seasons. And we can easily clear the snow off of these arrays as well to enhance the performance during the wintertime. This is a ground rack, which is much like the pole mount, but it tend to be lower to the ground, and multiple poles, and this could be any length. We could circle the world with a ground rack. Very simple structures, and we may have the ability to tilt them, maybe not. Very simple and inexpensive. Here we have a tracker, 2 trackers. Here we have a large array on top of a pole, and on top of that pole is a tracking mechanism. So this array will turn to the east at night, go to sleep, wait for the morning sun. Sun strikes the surface of the array, wakes it up, and then the array will track the sun across the sky during the day to the west, and then the sun sets, tracker rotates back to the east, goes to sleep, and waits for the sun again for the morning. So I alluded to this earlier, but when we have the array perpendicular to the rays of the sun, we get our maximum production. But if our array is fixed, our array doesn't see perpendicular to the sun until a little bit before and after noon. Well, if we have a tracker, we can have the array perpendicular to the rays of the sun all day, every day, regardless of season, regardless of time of day, and we'll get 25 to 30% more production out of the same array than if it was pointing to the south all day, every day. But now we have moving pieces that we have to take care of. More interaction. There are 4 types of systems that we'll talk about. The utility intertide system without batteries, simplest system out there. The bimodal system, which is also known as the utility intertide system with batteries. This is the type of system that, regardless of the condition of the utility grid, we always have power on site. PV direct, we're going to use power when we have it and when we need it, and when we don't have the resource, we don't need it. And then a standalone system where you are your own utility. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is just another illustration of the same thing. Here we have our PV array out in the backyard, and we have this power pole represents the utility. We're going to power up our home to some degree during the day, both from the renewables and the utility. They're both going to contribute to the electricity power needs of the home. But when the sun is high, we have lots of resource. Renewable energy will be a more contributor than the utility. And at sometimes during the day, we're going to have more output from our PV array than is required by the home. So we're going to power up all the needs of the home off of renewables and maybe even sell some to the grid. As the sun goes down in the afternoon or in the early morning, the utility is going to provide most of the power needs for the home, and the renewable energy some of the needs. And then at night, the utility will provide all the needs of the home. The PV array is sleeping. So depending upon the time of day and what you have running in your home will determine where the electricity comes from. Electricity always goes where the greatest need is. So system types. Here we have the utility intertide system without batteries. It's the simplest type of system out there for home use, and this can be a small unit that's going to provide a percentage of your needs, or it can be a larger system that's going to provide all your annual needs, or it could be larger than what you need on an annual basis, and you'll get a credit for your energy production at the end of the year. So here we have a simple setup. PV modules, size for the needs of the home, an inverter, which is going to change the DC electricity off the array into the usable AC, utility grade AC. And we're going to power up our loads. Excess energy, any excess energy is going to spin the meter backwards, and we're going to store electricity on the grid in the form of a credit. If we're not generating enough electricity off the PV array, we're going to buy electricity off the grid, and the meter will spin forward. End of the month, meter reader comes, reads our meter, and subtracts this month's number from last month's number, and we owe them or they owe us. The crux of this type of system is that it requires the utility in order to operate. If the grid goes down, the inverter senses that and automatically shuts down and physically disconnects from the utility. So if the utility grid is down, you're down. You don't have any access to that power that could potentially be generated by your PV modules. It just doesn't work. Once the grid is up again, the inverter will monitor that for 5 minutes. If everything's good in voltage and frequency, it will relink with the utility grid, and your system is up and running. On the pro side of this type of system it's the least expensive type of system out there to generate power for your home, and the most user-friendly. Here are the components. Here we have the array, size for the home's needs, the inverter, which is going to invert the incoming DC electricity off the PV array and invert it to usable utility grade AC. We're going to come out of the inverter into your breaker panel and land on a breaker which is going to be right inside your breaker panel. We're going to backfeed the bus bar, feed your loads. Any excess energy will go out through the main breaker to the utility meter, spin it backwards, and store up your credits. So we're always dependent upon the grid with this type of system. We need the grid for this system to operate. If the grid goes down, we're down. But it's a very simple, very reliable, very inexpensive system. Very little interaction from the homeowner. The next type of system, the bimodal or utility intertie system with batteries. Here we have PV modules sized for our needs. We have a charge controller, which is going to regulate the amount of electricity that goes into our batteries at any given time and maintain these batteries at 100%. Then we're going to tap off those batteries with an inverter, which can operate with low voltage batteries, and with the utility grid. So we're going to pick off the battery pack with the inverter, power up our loads, excess energy goes through the electric meter, out onto the grid, and we sell it in the form of a credit. If the grid goes down, the inverter physically disconnects from the utility grid, and we're up and running off the battery pack. And this happens instantaneously. We have no physical connection to the utility grid. We're running off the battery pack. The PV array out in the backyard is still producing electricity, tapping off our batteries, and from the batteries to the inverter to our loads. The battery pack is going to be sized for our needs during the average power outage and what we need to run during that average power outage. Maybe it might be a well pump or refrigeration or servers or lighting. Whatever you need to run during the power outage, the critical loads will run off this battery pack through the inverter to the load. Once the grid comes back up again, the inverter monitors for 5 minutes. If everything's okay, it relinks to the grid and we're up and running. We don't even know there's been a switchover. So this is a very reliable system out there. You have power all the time, 100% of the time, but it is also the most expensive type of system out there due to the batteries and the inverter. The inverter has to be able to operate standalone and with the utility. Batteries offer a whole another level of complexity that requires more interaction from the homeowner. If you don't check the oil in your car, you're not going to check the fluid level in the batteries. That's really important. The number one killer of a system like this is no participation or little participation from the homeowner. So you have to participate with this system and do service work on this on a monthly basis. Here's an older type of system, bimodal system, with a PV array located out back. DC power comes into this cabinet, down to the battery pack, here inside this wooden box, which is lined and sealed with silicone as a fiberglass liner, or the battery pack. We come out of the battery pack to the inverter, out of the inverter over to the main house panel, and when the grid goes down, the inverter will disconnect from the house panel and power up this critical load panel, which is going to power up refrigeration, well pump, heating, whatever we need to run during a power outage. When the grid comes back up again, the inverter senses that, relinks with the grid, and we're up and running. We don't even know that happened. Very reliable systems. Standalone system is a different kind of system, and we see more and more of these types of systems out there, but not in the form I'm going to tell you about first. So this is a home that's going to be powered up solely by PV. We aren't going to have any interconnection with the utility. So our array size is going to be larger because we're going to size it for when we have the least amount of resource, which would be the winter time. Generally, it's going to be running at low voltage as well. We're going to run it through a charge controller, which is going to charge regulate or gatekeep the electrons that are going to go and fill up the batteries. And then we're going to pick off the batteries with an inverter, and then we're going to power up our loads. That's it. That's all there is to it. So if we run out of electricity, or run out of power in our batteries, it's our own fault. We are our own utility. There's no utility backup, no utility interconnection. The battery pack size is going to be larger. It's going to be large enough to support all of our electrical loads for 3 to 5 days without any sunlight. So this is going to be a very large battery pack. So the interaction with this system from a homeowner has just now shot up astronomically. So we're going to be constantly looking, 3, 4 times a day, looking at how much we're producing, how much we're consuming, what does it look like before I go to bed, what does it look like when I get up in the morning. So we can plan out our day and what loads we might want to run during a sunny day opposed to multiple cloudy days. For example, I live in a standalone home. I have lived in one since 1997. A couple of years I didn't, but for the most part, I've been living in a off-grid home since 1997. No connection to the utility grid. So when I want to do 3-4 loads of laundry, I'm going to do it on a day like today, which is nice and sunny. And tomorrow is supposed to be nice and sunny. But I don't want to be doing this on a cloudy day when I'm going to have a couple of cloudy days in a row because I'm going to use up not quite a bit, but a significant amount of my battery capacity to do my laundry and run the well pump, run the washer, etc. But I want to know that I'm going to be able to replenish those batteries either that day or the next day. So I have to plan out my days accordingly. On the plus side, I don't have a utility bill. I'm self-contained. If I don't have enough electricity, that's my own fault. I don't pay a corporation to provide me with electricity. On the con side, it takes more interaction from me as a homeowner, and the price is higher too. But all in all, this is a system for me, not for everybody. But there's other types of standalone systems out there that I would like to point out, and I will in this sample. Here we have a home with a PV array up on the roof, generating low voltage DC, goes down to the battery pack, which is sized for 5 days of no resource, big lead acid batteries. So I have to be in that battery pack every 30 days checking fluid level, and every 60 to 90 days I'm going to do a controlled overcharge of the batteries so to get the solution boiling and knock sulfates off the plates. And every year I'm going to take all the bus bars off and connections off, clean everything up and put it back all together. More interaction. What is the lifetime of a battery pack? Well, it could be anywhere from 6 months to 10 years. 10 years is really pushing it for a battery pack, but if you take care of it, it certainly will last you that long. And it's certainly easy to burn out a battery pack in 6 months or sooner if you don't take care of it. So the homeowner needs to be vigilant of his batteries. From the battery pack is the inverter. Generally, not always, but generally, standalone homes are going to run at 120 volts instead of 240 volts. And everything's going to be AC power in the home. We're not going to have DC appliances or DC lighting or whatnot. Everything will be AC in general. And then out in the back shed, you're going to always have to have a generator. Here we have a nice 6,000 watt Honda generator that's always going to be out back waiting for those days when you don't have the solar resource to power up your batteries. Long durations of cloudy weather. Here in Wisconsin, we have 50% of our days are cloudy. It's not unusual to go the whole month of November without seeing the sun. So it's during those times that we have to get out the generator, fire it up, power up our batteries so that we can run our lights, run the water, etc. This last year, I ran the generator once, right around Christmas time. We had a long period of cloudy weather. And then I did it in February, around Valentine's Day. We had another stretch of cloudy weather. Here's an example of another standalone system. Here we have a PV panel powering up a battery, which is powering up an LED street lamp. These are becoming more popular for lighting remote areas and parking lots or trails or what have you. It's easier to put up one of these types of systems than to bury an underground line from a distant source to power up this street light. So these are becoming more popular. Crosswalk signs, stoplight signs, things like that are also standalone systems. Here we have a mobile power trailer. Here's the PV array in the up position. And below that we have a battery box and the inverters. And so this would be a remote power system for a construction site, communications, emergency communications, could power up anything that you need. Then when you're done, you lower the array, you lower that down flat on the bed, hook up your truck and move away. We have one of these systems here at the office, a system similar to this, and it's powered up big top Chautauqua, bands, radio stations, communications, construction sites, all sorts of things. Lots of flexibility. The last type of system I'd like to talk to about is the PV direct system. This is where we have a load that we need to run, in this case a pump, to circulate a fluid when the sunlight is heating the fluid on like a solar water heating system, and have PV modules which are going to run the pump. When the sun resource isn't available, we don't produce electricity. We also don't run the pump. An example of this would be a attic fan. This is a large attic fan. It has a PV module on it. When we have sunlight, we have electrical generation, which is running the fan. Also, we have sunlight, which is hitting the roof, heating up the attic. So when the sun is out, heating up the attic, we have venting. Another type of PV direct system would be the remote deep well pump. Here we have a PV array sized for a well pump, deep well pump. And when we have the solar resource, we pump water into the stock tank. A float turns off the pump when we reach the top of the tank. And so we pump water when we have the resource. When we don't have the resource, we have this reservoir of water for the cattle. Works out very nicely. So the size of system we need for our home is determined by many factors, mostly by the load. What is the annual load of the home? But also, what is the resource? Here we have a nice chart from the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. Most of the United States has a solar resource of 4 to 5 sun-hours per day. And then as we get closer to the desert southwest, we can see up to 7 to 8 sun-hours per day, where they have the best solar resource. But in our area, the majority of the United States, can we have solar electric systems here in the green sections? Well, of course. We just need a little bit more surface area to do the same amount of work. Germany, the nation of Germany, has even less solar resource. So they have like 3 to 4 sun-hours per day. And they've bought into the idea of having solar as a part of their energy mix. And on a sunny, windy day in the nation of Germany, they export electricity to the surrounding countries. If they can do it in Germany with less solar resource, we certainly can do it here in the United States with greater solar resource. So here's just a general chart of what our solar resource looks compared to our neighboring states. Not bad. Another factor in our placement of a solar electric array is going to be the path of the sun. So in the wintertime, we have the sun rising in the east. It'll be rising actually south of east, going across the sky at a low angle to the horizon, and setting south of west. In the summertime, the sun rises north of east, travels nearly over our head, and sets north of west. So the upper and lower portions of the travel of the sun start to establish what we call the solar window. This is the lower part of the window, and here's the upper part of the window. And if we look at a chart, here's the upper part of the window, here's the lower window, winter sun, summer sun, and then the sides of our window, this imaginary window in the sky would be 9 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So this time period, 9 till 3, is the size of the window. Summer sun, winter sun define the top and bottom of the window. So it's this time period right here, this imaginary window that's in our sky, that we generate 88% of our power production. This is the time period where we don't want to have any shading on our array. When we have shading, it reduces the power output of our array and could possibly even turn off our array. During our solar window, 9 till 3, winter to summer, we want to have a clear solar window. If this is our property here, when we have to deal with this tree line over here, this tree line over here, we may not be able to put our PV array where we would like it to go. It may end up in a different location. So this area right in here would be bad. The back part of this yard would be bad. Maybe we'd have to go to the south side of this building, which is on the opposite side. Other things to consider are neighbors, distance to the balance of systems. How far is it from the array to the balance of systems? Can we go great distances? Yes, but it also costs more money. Future considerations and goals of the home. Are you going to do any additions on there? What about landscaping? And then aesthetics. How does it look from the road? If we're going to sell this technology to the public, it has to look good. And then what about vegetative growth, especially with these trees right here and here? We need to know what species these are and the mature height, because we don't want to place an array at a location and find out 5 years later that it's going to be shaded within our solar window. One of our options is to put this PV array up on the rooftop, pointing to south all day, every day. But sometimes we can't do that, and maybe we have to put the array out back. Then we have other considerations. We'll go through these point by point. The goals of the home. what you want to do, the load of the home, how much you consume on an annual basis, space, how much space you have available up on a roof or in your backyard, and then how much it costs is going to determine what size of system you're going to end up with. So here's an example. The average US home consumes 12,000 kilowatt hours per year. So gather up 12 months of utility bills, electric utility bills, add them all up together, add up all the kilowatt hours per month, add them all up, get a grand total. How do you compare? Do you consume more per year or less per year? So what size system would this home need? Well, a home that consumes 12,000 kilowatt hours per year would need approximately a 10 kilowatt system based on the average solar resource, or sun hours per day. This home would need 10 kilowatts of PV to meet the annual needs, or would cost somewhere between approximately $40,000 to $50,000 for this system installation. But if we have a energy efficient home which consumes 6,000 to 8,000 kilowatt hours per year, or half to three-quarters of the consumption of the average American home, we can get by with half the amount of PV array or half the amount of costs. So for an energy efficient home, so this is a home that has compact fluorescent lights or LEDs, has a good newer or good refrigerator, low consumptive refrigerator, has water heating under control, can get by with 6,000 or even less kilowatt hours per year to power up the home. That's keeping the lights on the same amount of time as you do in the other home, which is inefficient. We're talking about doing the same amount of work with less energy input, not living in the dark and the cold. So anyway, so this home, using again the average sun hour of 4 sun hours per day, would need approximately system size of 5 to 7 kilowatts, or would cost approximately $20,000 to $35,000. So far better than the energy inefficient home. So if you want to know what the cost would be, the general cost for a simple utility intertie system, look at your utility bill. How does it compare to this number? Is it less than that? Is it more in this range? Or is it greater than this? If your home is consuming more than this number, then this number is going to be greater. If you consume less than this number, the number that you pay out of your pocket is going to be less also. Currently, many states have solar incentives to buy down the cost of systems, and the federal government currently has a 30% tax incentive that is available to us also. So this bottom line number will be less than we see right here at the end of the day, considering state incentives and federal tax incentive. Site assessment. The MREA, or Midwest Renewable Energy Association, maintains a list of qualified people that can do a independent assessment of your home, how much you consume, recommend a location for a PV array, give you a ballpark cost and size of that system, and then give you a list of people that would be qualified to install that system. That list is available at this website, www.mreacsa.org. So click on that link, go to the website, click on your state, and it'll pull up a list of people that are qualified to do that type of work. Highly recommend it. This will get your foot in the door, give you an idea of what it would take to get solar on your home. Next up, what kind of system is going to fit your needs? Well, the solar site assessment will help you figure this out. Can you get by with a simple, low-cost, low-interactive system, the utility intertie system without batteries? Or do you have critical loads that you need to run 100% all the time, like servers, life support, refrigeration? Maybe you need a battery-based system. Or maybe you want to be grid independent. So the type of system you choose is going to influence the cost in the end of the day. And what system you end up with is going to be based upon cost. So who can do this? Well, there's an organization out there, a nonprofit called NABCEP, or North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, or nabcep.org, who certify and maintain lists of certified installers. Certification doesn't prove competence, but there's some sort of measuring stick that these people have gone up against and prove that they can do a quality installation. So if you go to this website, nabcep.org/installer-locator-agreement, go into that website, click yes, I agree, and then click on your state, and it'll pull up a list of people that are qualified to do an installation on your home. And then contact 2 or 3 other contractors, NAPSEP installers, and get a bid. Get references, check on their references, ask the questions of them, ask the questions of the people they've done work for. How did this person do? What kind of service do they have? Do they stand behind their work? We're not to the point where we can just hire an electrician to make this happen. This is still a specialized field yet. What else? Well, you can take more classes from the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. We also have the Energy Fair, which is coming up June 21 to 23 here in Custer, Wisconsin, central part of the state. There's something going on from 9 o'clock in the morning till midnight. I think it's like $15 to get in the gate, or you can volunteer for 4 hours and get in for free. And there's over 150 different free workshops, from organic gardening to interconnection issues. And there's approximately 250 equipment vendors where you can talk to the manufacturers, kick the tires, and ask the questions. Well, if you want more information on that, go to midwestrenew.org/energy fair and find out more about it. Other places for information: Midwest Renewable Energy Association offers face-to-face and online courses and contract training, specialized training. If you want more information for that, go to midwestrenew.org/workshops. So I hope that this was of some benefit to you, that it whets your appetite and gives you some information and a starting place. There's certainly more to learn to this, and I hope you stay in touch with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, and I hope to see you at the fair.